opens, we pray that your presence will be before us and everyone who serves in the decision-making process of our city. We pray for direction which will lead our city to be strong and unified. May we continue the legacy of our founders. May we be granted this day the wisdom to make decisions which will be for the good of our city. We also pray for your special blessing on all those who are working to transform our city and make it a better place to live and work. Amen. If you please honor our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Counsel Noon.
Here.
Counsel Elliott.
Here.
Counsel Kennedy.
Here.
Counsel Leahy.
Here.
Counsel Laurie.
Here.
Counsel Martin.
Here.
Counsel Mendonça.
Here.
Counsel Mercier.
Here.
Mayor Murphy.
Here.
There's 9 present.
Thank you. Under the special meeting notice, notice is hereby given as required by Rule 6 of the City of Lowell City Council rules that the Lowell City Council will hold a special meeting of the Lowell City Council in the council chambers on Tuesday, September 17, 2013, at 7 p.m. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss the federal audit of the Lowell Housing Authority conducted by the Inspector General, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The public is invited to attend. At this point, before we open it up for discussion, I'll recognize the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As everyone knows, an audit report was issued on September 4th to the Boston Office of Public Housing at the Boston HUD office. The audit was completed by the HUD Inspector General, and it pertained to the use of ARRA money by the Housing Authority with their improvements that they made to a number of their properties over the last number of years. I believe it was 2008 through 2012. As everyone knows, the audit found or reported to the Boston office of HUD that there were deficiencies in the manner in which the Lowell Housing Authority proceeded with this work. They had 2 findings in their audit. The first was that the authority did not operate its in-house force account program in compliance with HUD regulations, and there were a number of subparts to that. And then a second finding that the authority did not always follow proper procurement procedures. As you know, because I sent a copy to the City Council back on Wednesday, I communicated to the Lowell Housing Authority Board, Chairman Zame and the members of the Housing Authority Board, my concerns with regards to the audit, that obviously this could have a detrimental impact upon the Lowell Housing Authority and their ability to provide crucial public housing to the residents of Lowell. I asked for a number of documents which they have provided me. We are now going through those, and I also offered them some assistance if they so chose and so needed as they worked with the Boston Office of Public Housing in addressing the concerns that were raised in the audit and the recommendations that were made by the Inspector General to the Boston office. I have not yet spoken to the Boston Public Housing Office, but I will in all likelihood do that over the next couple of days. I do have a contact there that I'm intending to speak with. The Lowell Housing Authority at their meeting last Wednesday did review this audit along with the management staff of the Housing Authority and made a decision to set up an audit committee which consists of a number of members of the Housing Authority Board, but also members of the Housing Authority staff. They did offer me the opportunity to have someone sit on that. I've chosen to have the Chief Financial Officer of the city sit on the audit committee. Mr. Moses has extensive experience with these types of audits. It's very similar in some respects to our own management letters that we receive on a regular basis from our auditor. And the Housing Authority has been given a certain amount of time to comply with the recommendations and the requests. at which time the the Office of Public Housing will make their determination on whether they will be satisfied. As you know, the Housing Authority is not a city agency. We do appoint 4 members to the Housing Authority Board. The city manager does do that with the approval of the City Council. The governor appoints 1 member. They're not a city agency. They're more of a state or agency with some federal oversight because most of their funding comes from the federal government. Though still some, I believe, some still comes from the state. But obviously it has an impact upon the residents of the city that utilize that public housing, and we want to make sure that their interests are protected and that the city's interests are protected. That's really it in a nutshell from where we are. I think the Housing Authority Board is taking the appropriate action in setting up the audit committee, and we're anxious to work with them whatever way we can to comply with the public housing office's request for addressing these issues.
Thank you. Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to thank Councilors Kennedy, Leahy, and Mercier, as well as members for attending here, but to put this meeting, calling a special meeting, to discuss this report. I hope we've all had a chance to go through it, because it is a scathing report, in my opinion. I think, in my opinion, it's a little bit more than just a couple of findings, Mr. Manager. I think there are so many findings that as I went from page to page, it was overwhelming, the number of issues, problems that were consistent throughout all of these findings. I understand it's an authority, but you, Mr. Manager, have 4 appointments, and we confirm them. And that is our responsibility. That's where our responsibility lies. And that's where we can take action. I understand, I read through 121B, setting up authorities. I understand their powers. However, they have failed. This report is clear that it's failed. It's filled with comments of lack of documentation, unsubstantiated cost, no documents to produce findings. I mean, I have to tell you, as I continue to go through it, I had to take a little bit of a break in this day and age of computerization and systems and audits, that this was allowed to continue to the point of this report. We haven't seen the IG from the state yet. We haven't seen the Attorney General. So I will continue to read through to the comments, because that's what audits do. The auditors come in, they have findings. There were 10 significant findings, and within those findings, there are issues. And what is of concern to me, Mr. Manager, is that even in 2008, when problems were identified, nothing changed. There are some references in here to changing out staff. But in comment number 6, they continued to find lack of planning, failure to determine cost effectiveness that were prevalent from 2008 right through to 2012. We're providing assistance. That's good. However, the appointments, even throughout the 7-month audit, no questions, no one raises issues, no one took an interest in really the multitude of violations of here in this report. I just can't believe it. I can't even find the words or any way to explain how this possibly could have gotten to this point. There's findings in here where the carpenter was making decisions on when to close units and when not to close units. So, we can do one or two things. We can change, if we want real change, if you want real change, Mr. Manager, we change the board members, because they have not fulfilled their responsibilities for years, knowing this was going on. Even through the audit, nothing was done, no questions were raised. And that's what your responsibility is. If we want to make sure that systems change, that someone is put in place, an oversight board and an executive director that can straighten out this mess, then we need complete change. That's how I feel. We haven't seen any, I don't know, you said you haven't spoken to HUD yet. But, let me just go back. I think back to the time when this board adopted regulations for the new liquor licenses, when we had major problems in the downtown area with some liquor establishments. And we adopted a number of regulations, and a couple of board members didn't seem to support those regulations. So you acted to remove those license commissioners and replace new ones. We have 11 million, and in my opinion, after reading this, in unaccounted funding, where we get a letter from the executive director saying nowhere is there cited of waste, fraud, and abuse. There's no way for them to make that determination because there is so little information given. So, as we go through the discussion, I do have many issues that I'd like to continue to ask, but if we want real change, if you're serious about improving the condition, putting systems in place, putting controls in place, adopting policies. This should have been done years ago. It wasn't done until it was uncovered. So I think the way to effectuate real change is to put a board in place, not an ad hoc subcommittee that's going to try to figure out what systems should be in place. A real board and change that will provide real oversight, accountability, take a serious interest in putting that housing authority back on track, not losing revenue, and straighten the process out. I think the straw that has to break the camel's back is when I found I read in one of the multitude of comments, purchase orders were dated after invoices were submitted. Change orders were executed after all the work is done. That's a real lack of oversight. It's a rudderless ship, and there's only one way to right it. Thank you.
Is there a motion there? Is there a motion there, Counselor?
There wasn't a motion. That was just my statement. I can't tell the manager what to do. Right.
I didn't know if there was a motion. Counselor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a scathing report. It was unbelievable to go page by page and read what we have uncovered to be lack of direction and leadership, lack of following the rules, proper paperwork missing, did not follow HUD rules, and every week we are told we got to follow the rules. Rules change and we have to follow them, so we try to do that. We see that unauthorized deviation from specifications inadequate purchase orders, prevailing wage not followed, inadequate inventory controls, and on and on and on. Now, it is true, perhaps, we have no direct jurisdiction over the Lowell Housing Authority. That perhaps is true, but we vote to appoint the people that the manager brings forth to oversee an entity that houses our constituents. So although we don't have direct jurisdiction, the people that live in every single unit of that housing are our constituents. Just because they live in housing don't mean that, it's the LHA. We don't have anything to do with that. They're my people. They're my constituents. And when they have a problem, and I can see it through this audit that they do. So I say, when you think that they're going to spend, or perhaps it's possible that they might have to give back $11 million. I hope they don't, but I'm not sure. How does this affect their quality of life? I'm sure that the housing does the best they can. The maintenance crew there is second to none. I know quite a few of them. They do a tremendous job. But through age of the buildings and the housing units, wear and tear, are they going to be less serviced because of the fact that they're missing all this money that has to be returned for things that wasn't done properly in the first place? So my question for the evening is there more coming? Are we going to hear any more about this? I don't know. I know that we support unions. I'm sure we do. And I know that unions do a tremendous job, but you have to provide the prevailing wage. Perhaps it would have been the right way to do it, the way that we're supposed to, is to split some of the work, let it go out the proper way, then everybody would have got a piece of the pie. I'm not saying to not go union or but rules should have been followed and rules were not. The leader, I believe, is at fault. And if there's more coming, and I kind of think there is, I'll hold my thoughts for later.
Councilor Lowry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for the record, no one ever asked me if I wanted a special meeting. I would have supported it. There were 4 signatures on there. No one ever called me. I saw 3 of the councilors that day after it was signed. But if a motion was made last Tuesday night to have a special meeting, I would have supported it. So the lack of my signature on that piece of paper was because I wasn't contacted, not because I didn't want a special meeting. That said, reading the report, and it was funny, when you read the report, and I think in the first paragraph it says it came about because of a newspaper story, and that was Lyle Moran, so I want to congratulate Lyle. But I think before that, it came from, I see him sitting behind me, Mr. Doyle. Mr. Doyle talked about this 2 years ago during the election. So if it was Mr. Doyle who started it, and it was Lyle's story who the OIGs picked it up. That said, when you read the report, at the bottom it says, if you have any questions, call me. So I did. I called the OIGs, the OIG who compiled the report. And I asked him, was anyone arrested or removed? And he said, does it say that in the report? And I said, well, no. And I'll just leave it at that. I've worked with them in the past. He just said, no. I said, basically, what is the criteria here? And he said it goes back to HUD, and they have 120 days to rectify this situation. Now, whether they will or not, I have no idea. And if they don't, they have to pay back the money they can't rectify. And that could be, I guess, about $11 million. It could be a heavy fine. And I agree with Councilor Mercia that the residents, I hope, are fined during this time period. Last night, I got a phone call from a former builder in the city, a very well-established, well-respected man in this community, and I know he's watching tonight. And we talked for about a half hour, and I'm not a builder, and I know nothing about these things. And he went over with me quite a bit, and I thank him tonight for what he did. And I went back and reread the order the second time. It is scathing, and it's awful. But my concern is, And we do have 4 board members there. At least 2 came on after 2000, maybe one definitely came on after the report. Maybe the other one did too. They haven't been there very long. My biggest concern here is talking to the federal agents. They have 120 days to report back to HUD. I don't know if we should be interfering. I think at the end of the 120 days, if this isn't rectified, I can't even imagine what's going to happen over there. But they're giving them 120 days to come forward and prove it. And again, I don't know if they will, but they got it. I don't know if this council would be impeding on a federal investigation at this point by removing people or asking them. You could ask anyone, I guess, but to really remove them, I don't know if I would go that far. We're in the middle of a federal investigation, and the government has given them 120 days. But the report is so bad, it's awful. I guess my question is, do we go along with the 120 days? And I think I'm also surprised that maybe the governor hasn't appointed someone to oversee it. I think he's done that with other housing authorities in the state that's had issues. This one he didn't do that with, and I don't know why, or maybe he will. That's up to the governor of Massachusetts. But I have concerns about dealing with that board in any which way before that 120-day grace period. It's a real concern to me. I'll let the other councilors speak, but as I said, I called the federal government, I called the OIGs. What's going on? They said they have 120 days to answer the HUD, or they're going to start paying back some money. So that's the only question I have. Do we give them the 120 days, or at least go from there? And I know the manager has now appointed Mr. Moses as part of that team. That said, is the LHA going to keep us up to date with reports? And I know Mr. Moses is part of it.
Yes, as information becomes available to us, we will pass that on to the council to keep you.
Has our board members said anything at this point? But just going forward?
The board members,
Yeah.
our board members, they've communicated, again, to me that they are looking to resolve this. You know, obviously, they're depending upon their staff to do much of the work, but they do have the audit committee to work on sort of overseeing to make sure that the progress is made and to provide any input to that.
The government's given them 120 days.
Right.
I agree with Councilor Mercy. I'm very concerned of the people living there. And would it be appropriate to have executive session with our members anyway to find out what their thoughts are or what's going forward over there?
I'll defer to the city solicitor, but I don't think there's any grounds for a executive session under
Okay.
the open meeting law.
Madam Solicitor.
Right, we can review it more carefully, but offhand, nothing is coming to mind that would fit the criteria to allow both parties to enter into an executive session discussion for that purpose, unless, and the only thing that would come close is some sort of pending charges and things like that.
Right. Thank you. I'm concerned about the integrity of the investigation. I'm concerned about the citizens. Boy, it's a tough one, and maybe they will. Maybe they'll justify the money. I don't know. But they do have the 120 days, but thank you.
Mr. Manager.
The only other comment I would make, and obviously I'm concerned about the sort of about a number of issues with regards to this, but I think that the top priority right now has to be for the benefit of the Lowell Housing Authority, and particularly for the residents that live at the Lowell Housing Authority now and in the foreseeable future, that they work with HUD to put together the necessary documentation that so that that $11 million is kept safe, and that really is a top priority that we have to have at this point in time, along with making sure the procedures and processes and systems are in place. And that's something that the HUD office will be working with them on. So.
Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I start, I have a question for the city manager. Mr. Manager, at the beginning of in your opening comments this evening, you indicated that the Lowell Housing Authority is not a city agency, that it is in fact a state agency funded partly by the federal government. In your letter to the city to, I guess, Chairman Zame, but also sent to the members of the city council on September 11th, you indicate in the letter that you were willing to offer assistance relative to the findings, and then later on, I am able to offer technical assistance to the Housing Authority. My question would be, what authority do you have to do that? If they're not a city agency, I don't understand that you would have the authority to, why you would have the authority to offer technical assistance from the city when that technical assistance is funded through the city's budget. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do, I guess.
And I understand that the letter is well-intentioned, and but this is not our problem per se.
Correct.
So why would we want to jump in? And more than that, wouldn't it be illegal, really, for us to, or contrary to the statutes, for us to offer technical assistance?
I don't know if I would say it would be illegal. We would work with, any number of partner organizations to give some advice. I mean, we're not going to be doing work, per se for them. I was looking out for the residents of the Lowell Housing Authority properties. We have some expertise here. We do make appointments. I do make appointments, or the city manager makes appointments. Some of the people that are there are people that I've reappointed since I've been here, that were appointed prior to my coming on. And I felt it was in the issue of cooperation. If the university were to contact me, or if there was something going on at the university, and I felt that they could benefit by our providing some technical assistance on a particular issue. As they open up parking garages, we've certainly made our parking staff available to work with them if they have questions, if we can help them. Likewise, that was my thought process with the Housing Authority.
I guess I think that the budget that we passed in June is tight. And it should be tight over at the Housing Authority and tight with, as far as code inspectors and that type of thing as well. And so to be able to offer assistance, and I guess it's maybe the type of technical assistance that you're going to offer is a lot different from what it seems to imply in the letter. Yeah. Is that the case? Anyways, I don't want to prolong this, but I do think that it's not proper for us to be sending people over there to help them. They're not an agency that's understaffed, and I don't think staffing is what caused the problem or is going to hinder them in getting out of the problem. And so, do you have anything else you want to say on that?
Well, I guess the classic between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, I have a counselor who wants to sort of pin this sort of whole situation on me, and then I have you, counselor, who, as I try to help resolve these, wants me to. So it's either, I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't on this one. I'll take that as going with the territory.
Yeah, I'm not trying to pin you to anything. I'm just trying to caution you that maybe you don't have the authority to offer that type of assistance, and we should be careful about it, and careful about how involved we want to get into the situation.
And I agree with you on that, Counselor. It's not a case where we're going to put staff in the offices over there. It's not a case where we're going to be doing anything other than if someone asks for our advice, and we can provide that, be involved to the extent that do that and know what's going on so that we can report to the council and to the public.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, I think that regarding the Housing Authority, the executive director, two of the main functions over at the Housing Authority are the day-to-day operations and then these type of capital projects. And I think, at least for the time that I've been here, and even before I was here, I have never heard that there have been any problems with the day-to-day operation. But it's pretty clear that in terms of these capital projects or the capital projects that are subject of the audit, that the audit report is very, very bad, if you read it. And the fact that you have the Attorney General and the IG also doing investigations is very, very bad. But I guess what do we do about it? What can we do about it? And I don't think that there's so much that we can do about it. I have known I don't know the executive director very well, but I've known the executive director of the Housing Authority for a long time. So yesterday, I called the executive director just to hear what he had to say about it. And then today, earlier today, I also had a phone conversation with Chairman Zame about the same issue. And right now, we're looking at over $11 million, and that's really bad. And the Lowell Housing Authority does not have the reserves to pay that kind of money. I believe they have probably about $2 million in reserves. But I also think that they are, or at least I've been assured by the executive director and by the chairman, that they're working closely with HUD, that they've outsourced for technical assistance, and that they are confident that within a 4 to 8 month period, that $11 million will be reduced substantially. So I guess I think at this point, rather than to just be further disruptive to the situation, it's probably best to let it play out. I guess as I look at the situation, I look at us as being halfway across the stream. And it's a very bad situation, and we're in pretty deep water now. But hopefully, they will be able to work with HUD and negotiate and reduce that amount to an amount that's much less than the $11+ million that we're looking at now. It makes sense to me to let them do that for the next 4 to 6 months, and when I had during my conversation with the executive director, he indicated to me that he would be quite willing to communicate with the council on a monthly basis, to keep us apprised month by month as to how it's all going along. And I think that's a good thing. He's been the executive director there for a long time. I think that there's a lot of problems over there as far as the audit goes, as far as capital projects go. There's a lot to be rectified. But I think in terms of what we're going to do about the $11 million, that they seem confident that they can reduce that substantially. And I would like to believe that they can. And I think that anybody that would be in the executive director's position today would like to have that time to be able to rectify the situation. So I guess that's where I am on that one. I think that as far as the council goes and as far as what our involvement is only with the Board of Commissioners. And maybe there are people on the Board of Commissioners that aren't that interested. I think if you have commissioners who say they are overwhelmed or who don't attend meetings or who are silent at meetings, that isn't a good thing. I think that if there were people on this city council that didn't ask you any questions, that remained silent, that didn't show up for meetings, they wouldn't last on this city council for very long. I think we have a right to expect the same thing for the Lowell Housing Authority commissioners. And so I think it might be a good idea for you to speak to the 4 people who you have appointed and see if they wish to continue as commissioners. And if they do, to see if they're going to be diligent about their responsibility, because they do have a responsibility. I don't think that if we get rid of the 4 commissioners, that's going to solve the whole thing. And I don't want to put this on them. But certainly, I expected a little bit more from the Board of Commissioners when the audit came out than what I got. And I think that, they just need to be a lot more engaged than what they are. And maybe some of the appointments to the Board of Commissioners were not the best. And so maybe we should be careful going forward when we make these appointments, but it seems to me that it's worthwhile at least polling the 4 people that you do appoint and see if they wish to continue, and how they're going to continue if they are. And that's I think that's at least part of this problem. And I'm not sure that as a city council we can do much more than that.
Any further discussion? Council Martin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I agree with a fair amount that's been said. You know, the report does raise serious issues. I think we are all concerned for the welfare of the residents of the Lowell Housing Authority. I think Councilor Mercia is absolutely correct when she says that the people that live in housing authority units are our constituents, and I think the council is right to be concerned about things that could impact their ability to live in quality housing. So I think, you know, that this inquiry is appropriate and needs to, I think, continue. And I also agree with the comments that, you know, this is somewhat new to us. The report was just issued. There is a 120-day response period. That was the recommendation, I think, of the audit, that this be referred to the regional office to work with the housing authority to see if some of the things that are missing can be documented, so that there is not as much question about how much money may have been misspent or improperly documented. So, and I think we are certainly would be wise to pay attention to the role of the board. I mean, that is the one, I guess, lever the city council has is the ability to confirm board appointments. We've had that for a number of years. I know this is a little bit unique because certain board appointments come from a limited universe, and sometimes it's difficult to get people from those limited universes. The needs to be a tenant appointment. There needs to be an appointment from organized labor, some certain other groups. So, but you know, I think it's also fair to point out some of these people are new to the role. The findings that were made in this report largely relate to a period of time prior to their service. Certainly, I think as the appointees have appeared here, they've appeared serious. They've actively sought the position, and they do have a responsibility. And I think we need to give them some opportunity to meet their obligation that's identified in this report. So I think, you know, to my point of view, reading this raised a number of serious issues. Certainly the council is, you know, wise to be concerned about that. And I think the offer of assistance hopefully will be supported. We've gone through a process where, you know, our financial condition has just been very favorably commented upon by outside agencies, and Mr. Moses had a lot to do with that. And I think, you know, to the extent he's able to offer expertise, or whether we have expertise in procurement or some other areas, I think we should offer that expertise, because the residents of the Housing Authority are residents of Lowell. They're constituents of ours. We should be concerned about them. So, you know, I'm willing to give folks a chance and try and make this right. You know, follow the recommendations of the report for now, and keep a close eye on this and see what further information is brought to light. There is still another report to be issued from what we understand. So I think we also need to pay attention when that comes out.
Any further discussion? Council Leahy.
Thank you.
the only thing I just wanted to add is that when we did get the letter from the manager's office last week, I was concerned about what degree we could help out. So I'm glad to hear tonight that, offering technical support, assistance over there will help. And again, as many of the councils have said, these are our constituents, they are people, Lowell. We need to make sure that, for their well-being, first of all, and then let them go through this for the 120 days, see what happens. But it is our responsibility to keep an eye on it. So that's all I wanted to add.
Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Manager, you made a comment earlier about that I'm trying to pin this one on you. That's the last thing that I'm trying to do. My point was, you're the individual that makes the appointments. You're the one that can effectuate change. I'm not trying to pin it on you. You're not running the authority over there. But I dare say, if you would ever have come across a report remotely close to, I have to say, I've never seen an audit like this with so many wrongdoings. I never have. I venture that you haven't. I venture that the auditor haven't. So if we want to truly make some change, whether they're new members, not interested members or not, I look to you to make that change. I find it hard to believe that anybody that would receive this report a month ago, and then we finally got it in September, rather than go out and hire an audit firm to come in and conduct analysis of the systems or lack of systems in place, lack of internal controls, numerous material weaknesses, they go out and hire an audit firm, an accounting firm, right off the bat. Similarly to what the auditor did when we had a problem with the cash reconciliation. Went right out, got an outside audit firm, come in, straighten the books out. Not hire a public relation firm to start, writing letters to city council about what they're doing. That doesn't tell me there's a serious direction to move to correct the problem. We had a problem in the parking department, lack of communication, lack of oversight, you fired them. I think that those are examples of what needs to take place. And the responses and the comments to these findings doesn't send the message to me that we're going to get to the bottom of this, that we're going to find out where the money went, why it was spent. There's a comment in here, the auditors couldn't even find where washers, dryers, and refrigerators were placed. There's no inventory. That's unconscionable. So to get to the bottom of this, get some people that are on board, they're going to go meeting after meeting, get some people with some expertise, background that'll go in, that have an interest in changing that. Otherwise, we sit back and do nothing. Send over some assistance. We condone the activity. 4 to 6 months is just going to continue to go on and on. We'll continue to look for receipts. Who knows where they're going to find. If you can't find documentation beforehand, the auditor knows this better than anyone. If you can't find them while they're conducting the audit, how in the world are you going to find them after? That's when you want to find them. You want to do all your work up front when the auditors are in there, get them everything they want. So this doesn't come out. So I find it hard to believe that all this missing documentation on $11 million is going to be able to be found. So that's why I think we need real change. I think we have to take strong measures. We're not talking about a couple of $1,000s. We're not kind of talking about a finding or two. We're talking about multiple violations, mismanagement, and leadership. And we need to take strong measures to get significant change. That's my only point. I'm not trying to pin it on you, Mr. Manager. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Council Noon, then Council Lori.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess we all agree that this is a serious problem that we have before us. We also agree that step has been taken and will have to continue to take to address the problem. And they do have 120 days to do so. And that's for the Lowell Housing Authority. I noticed that our manager here has promptly reached out to the commissioner and the director of the housing, expressed his concern on behalf of the council and offer assistance if need be. So I agree with some of my colleagues that it's to give time to the Lowell Housing Director and staff to work on this, address this problem, and monthly report back to us of the progress, if any, they have made. And that's how I feel at this time, because, again, we can't throw all the commissioners under the bus. Some of these commissioners just started. It's not their fault. When problem arrive, we can't just keep on going around and point fingers. There's 2-3 commissioners that was appointed. Us all council responsible for it. We put them there. Yes, the managers appoint them. Us who make decision whether or not to appoint. And we did so. We appoint all 3 of them. So what I'm saying now is that give them time, because step has been taken according to the corresponding back and forth here. So that said, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Council Lori and then Council Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As far as doing anything with the board, I'm going to reiterate a little bit what I said earlier. That audit was conducted by the Office of Inspector General. Those are federal agents. When I was with the union with the post office, unfortunately, I dealt with them with employees. There were refrigerators missing. There was $25,000 they couldn't find, I think, with shipping. There were several problems they found. But I do know this about the Office of Inspector General. If they suspect criminal wrongdoing, they call you in the office, read you your rights, and then what they call the Martha Stewart law. You lie to us, we're going to charge you. And it's that simple. That wasn't done in this case to my knowledge. So you had federal agents conduct that audit. Now they've turned it over to HUD. My other question is, you appoint the board and we confirm it, and I agree with Councilor Kennedy. You should go and you should ask questions. You should be diligent in your work. At this point, who do they answer to, us or HUD or the government or the state? And if you remove or attempt to remove anyone, are you getting involved in it's actually a federal investigation at this point. But my real fear is, who do they really answer to? We have residents there, and again, they were given 120 days by the OIGs and HUD, so I don't know.
Well, I guess I would, it's a tough question, and we'd have to look at some of the legalities of that, but they are appointees of the manager with confirmation by the city council. But they are a separate authority. They don't represent the city. It's not like the License Commission. So it's, I think it would probably go to the state, in all likelihood, that would have greater authority to do something of that sort. I also think it's important to note that there are a number of new members there, and there's a comment was made a little while ago that nothing has been done until it was uncovered. Well, that's the purpose of these audits. Now, generally, you get these in your own audits. This is a little different because it comes out of the Inspector General's office. But as I said, it's not unlike our own management letters. And, we certainly have a history here in the city of having, during the, periods pre-2007, of having some pretty scathing management letters. But the question is, once you get the management letter, what do you do about it? And, or are you asking for copies of the management letter? And in this case, the Lowell Housing Authority Board just got this audit. Their audits, their internal audits, or their independent auditors that they have issued, and if you note my letter, I did ask for copies of all those audits, and they did have an outside auditor that came in and has looked at their finances, looked at their internal controls, and has not made any findings. So the Lowell Housing Authority Board seems to be, in that respect, seems to be doing their job by having that audit and reviewing that. But this action by the Inspector General coming in is something somewhat unique. They got it, they've taken action, and I think my own opinion is we need to watch and see how that proceeds. I think a number of councilors have said that. And the most important thing, as I said earlier, was making sure that they complied and they made sure that the money was documented, because that seems to be the biggest issue that the Inspector General has identified.
You know, if the Officer of Inspector General and HUD wants to give them 120 days, well, that's their finding. I would be willing to give them the 120 days. But that's, I'm just very concerned about doing anything to that board while this investigation and the compliance, the investigation's done and the compliance is now in effect. I'd be very leery about doing anything during that time period. Thank you.
Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that nobody is trying to blame the board, but it shouldn't be lost on anybody that there's, I think, more discussion about this issue here this evening at the city council meeting than there was at the commissioners' meeting last Wednesday, and that isn't a good thing. I mean, I realize that there are members on there that are new and that and that need a little more time, but people should be asking more questions over there. And I just would want to add, because everybody keeps talking about 120 days, but in my discussion yesterday with the executive director, he was not aware that there was any 120-day time frame on that, and thought that maybe they wouldn't be complete, or what they had outsourced for technical assistance, that those people wouldn't be complete until maybe 180 days. So it could be that it's going to last a couple of more months than what we think here this evening before the whole thing's squared away. But once again, the executive director was confident that the 11 plus million dollars that's not missing but isn't duly accounted for, that amount of money, that will be a lot less, substantially less, when the whole thing is complete. And I would think that now that they're working closely with HUD, and that HUD is aware that they don't have the money, and that they will, there'll be an effort to try to make sure that that they account for as much of that 11 plus million as possible. You know, it's two different things. One is, they've really messed up over there on this one, and how are they going to get out of it? But the second thing is, what type of corrective action are they going to take in order to make sure that this doesn't happen again? And in some ways, that ends up, aside from the 11 million, the second thing ends up being more important going forward than the former thing. And so, so that's all that I'd like to say, except that also Commissioner Zame indicated that besides being concerned about reducing the amount of the $11 million, he was also committed to finding out what broke down, or where the problems were that caused the whole thing to happen in the first place. Because obviously the controls that they have over there and the systems that they have over there are just either just weren't followed or they're not adequate.
Councilman Johnson.
Obviously, I think we're all concerned about the audit report and what's in it. Clearly, there are things they need to correct. But they're not questioning, say, the $11 million in spending from what I read in the report. What they're questioning was that the process followed actually was to produce savings that they were claiming by going with the forced labor account versus going out to bid. So I don't think that the documentation they're lacking is not in what they actually spent in construction and renovations, but rather being able to substantiate that that was the proper course of action. That was not apparently done properly, and now they're going to have to get an architectural firm, costing them more money, to create that. So clearly, they're not going to find that paperwork. It doesn't exist. So they're going to have to backpedal and create some of this. And if some of this doesn't turn out to substantiate their original claims, then some portion of that $11 million may have to be paid back to the federal government because they chose to go a route that may have been less cost-effective than they could substantiate. And then, of course, there are inventory issues. Nobody's saying the equipment is missing, but they don't have a proper accounting and proper listings, which, again, they'll probably have to create after the fact in order to satisfy them. There might be some negative implications there. So I'm very concerned about the audit. There are real issues here that need to be addressed by the board. As been stated before by Councilor Kennedy, I'm concerned about diving into this mess with city resources. Certainly wade in and try to offer some assistance, but careful how much of our resources get stuck in this endeavor. And in case there are any legal issues going forward as to what entities can get involved and which cannot. We don't have a monetary stake in this per se. We're not going to be liable for any of the money that needs to go back to the federal government. I am also concerned about the board and their actions and their handling of their meetings and their role. And certainly they should take another look at that and be more assertive in their roles. That needs to be, I think, impressed upon them, at least our appointees. And as I think Council Martin stated also, it's a limited number of people that we could appoint because one has to be a tenant, one has to be a labor representative. That's half of our appointments to the board. The other one's the governor's, and we have 2 more. And again, and 2 of those were recent appointments, so they really can't be held responsible for things that happened years ago. And going forward, if we remove members, which maybe that's a possibility, and replace them, with this mess going on, I don't see a lot of people raising their hands to join this effort. So that could be another problem we'll be facing. Now, so I'm very concerned. Having said all that, I'm still waiting to hear what the urgency was because I don't see it. I don't know where the 120 days is coming from. I knew from the beginning that there'd be ample time to resolve this. It's years in the making of the problem, 6 months in the making of the report. Could be another 6 months in getting this resolved, and everything could have been said next week that was said tonight, and I'm not sure what action we're taking. Right now, none. So it's almost like, what's the rush? We do need to see this addressed. Mainly the Housing Authority needs to clear this up. But I don't see anything happening this evening that's going to accelerate anything at the moment. And I do want to see this resolved. It needs to be done appropriately, and it's going to take time because they're going to have to go back and create documentation that doesn't exist. It's the only way they can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? We do have a registered speaker.
Fred Doyle.
If you'd please state your name and address for the record. You'll have
My
5
name is
minutes to
Frederick
speak.
Doyle. I live at 27 Lincoln Parkway, Lowell, Massachusetts. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I was here December 3rd in 2011 and presented a case to you with affidavits of what's happening here tonight. At that time, 9 councilors, there was only 4 councilors weren't here. Laurie, Councilor Leahy, Councilor Kennedy, and Councilor Noon weren't here. The only one that took those affidavits was Councilor Elliott. Not one councilor said a word, and I told you that night. The city manager is responsible for this. Get away from him, we're headed for trouble. Nobody listened. Manager went on the air the next day and said, they don't have to get permits under the 1936 law. The manager's in a meeting with these people, a meeting in his office, interjected himself in January 13, 2009, and this is what he said. Mr. Sheehan also, to allow your architect to assume some liability. Mr. Sheehan also committed to city cooperating to the extent practicable. Mr. Camacho informs me LHA has in the past obtained building permits and paid and associated fees for converting flat roofs, pitch roofs, replacing water closets, replacing furnaces and water heaters. The current project should be treated no differently. That comes from the manager's office. Then he goes on the radio the next day and said they don't have to get permits under a law from 1936. That law went out 50 years ago. Why would you tell them they could? And then on top of that, you said, we'll minimize the permit. Only one person that can minimize permits, and that's the city council, you. He can't minimize permits. And he offered that in his offering with them on January 13, 2009. He also sends a letter to Mr. Wallace. Remaining permits should be issued as the project progresses. The city has been more than patient with LHA, but I cannot allow this disregard of the law to continue. Failure to obtain building permits will leave the city with no alternative but to shut the project down by issuing a cease and desist order. That's January 13th. There was a cease and desist order by the buildings department June 3rd. 10 days before he sent the letter. He said he was going to, it was already issued. He interfered with this from day one. This board should be replaced. The director should be replaced. Where did you ever hear of a director being the chairman of a board? He's the director, and he takes over the board. He's the chairman, makes the motions. And what kind of system is that? This all initiates from him, 100%. Here's another one, when he said, you will cease and desist on January 30th. September 8th, another criminal violation notice, ignored by the Housing Authority. The building commissioner gets upset. He goes to the Department of Public Safety and files a complaint. The Lowell Housing is found guilty of what they were doing. Just excuse me for a minute. Then he sends a letter to the building commissioner informing him that to issue permits for the electrical work and the plumbing work. There was no general permit. There was no architect on the scene. The architect they were talking was in jail pending an alleged murder case. So there was no architect on the job. Then he sent a letter, had a meeting in his office with Mr. Sheehan, sent a memo to Mr. Camacho, issue the permits for the plumbing and electrical work at the North Common Village. The building commissioner objected. The next day, the license commission, the electrical boss, and one of the Mr. Walcom from the building department were told to sign permits. There was no permits, but to sign that they inspected. They refused because the permits were never taken out. How can you inspect something that was never done? Then Camacho said he had enough. He left the city. Then a position opened up for building inspector, building commissioner in the city of Lowell. The man that refused to turn down to sign the permits was not even interviewed. He was the only person in the office that had all the required licenses and everything. Hired a friend of his, no license, sat in a chair for 2 years. They had to send him to Colorado to pass the test. Now we get to the electrician.
Mr. Doyle,
Yes?
under city council rules, you have 1 minute left to speak.
All right, I'll finish up. Give me 1 minute.
One more
Then the
minute.
electrical man was called into the office and demoted and cut his pay $31,000. How can you do that to a person with a family, 31 years in the city, a disabled veteran, and cut his pay to $31,000? And this council cut that man's pay. That's all I got to say, but I'll tell you what, he has to go, and then the trouble stops. Thank you very much.
Any further discussion from the city council? I'd entertain a motion. Motion by Council Mendonça.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Council Mendonça. Seconded by Council Martin. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. We stand adjourned.